which I think some of you I know have watched since then. And thanks to Emily for inviting Dave for number 3 of the speaker series. So Dave's been involved with a lot of different things, and I'm not going to try and list them all now. Some of them are very famous, like the McLibel too. I'm sure we'll hear a bit about that. But a lot of them, and really one of the main reasons we're excited to have David, is this whole other side of activism, which is around community empowerment, community organising, working with everyone from residents associations, anti-poll tax groups, to the Friends of Parks national movement. And so Dave's just going to kick off with a kind of potted history, I think, of some of the things, and then we'll just go straight to questions. And I hope people have lots of questions. But thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to your august headquarters. I'm not quite sure exactly what you want to discuss, so I'm just going to kind of run through what I've been up to in the last 48 years as an activist, briefly, and then hopefully that you think, oh, I would like to ask about that or comment or get to the discussion. So hopefully it's not about me, it's about the things that I've been involved with, but obviously I need to tell you what those are. So first of all, I just want to say that currently I'm a council tenant in Tottenham, and got 3 kids, and I've been a lifelong activist since 1974. So another year, I'll be 50 years. So in the 70s, just a few things. In the 70s, I was active in the post office. I was a postman in Islington. N7 was my patch, but we used to come to N1, which is your very own patch, to the main sorting office on a regular basis as well. So did that for about 6 years, and I was involved with a kind of trade union activist network, and I was branch secretary of the union branch at one point. So then in the 1980s, I was involved with the claimants unions movement. I was unemployed, and there was about 150 local claimants unions around the country, which is a kind of solidarity mutual support network for claimants, very active. And I got involved with London Greenpeace, which of course, as you all know, was the original Greenpeace group in this country, which started 71, 72. I'll come to that in a minute. So while I was involved with London Greenpeace, I was kind of actually just kind of thinking, you know what, I want to be more involved with community stuff. And I got involved with the anti-poll tax movement, as millions of people did in this country. It was an incredible movement, and I'll be very happy to talk about that, which was a successful movement that defied the imposition of the poll tax. What says here? I've got a note here saying see book. And hold on a second, hold on. Just so I can plug a book. Hold on. Got about. Yeah, I can pass that round there. I can pass this round. It's Poll Tax Rebellion, which I helped to write one of the chapters. Guess which one that was, about Trafalgar Square Defendants Campaign for the people arrested at Trafalgar Square. So you can have that in your library. I don't know if you've got a library, but you can put that in your library. So, but then with London Greenpeace, I was thinking, I just sort of like, get involved with more community level stuff now, especially after the poll tax. And then I was sued by McDonald's, which of course was a great honour. I recommend it to everybody. If you want to get global publicity, get sued by McDonald's. And that became the longest case in English legal history. And we defended ourselves, me and Helen, who also lived in Tottenham, from London Greenpeace. So I know that you've circulated a link with the film, the documentary, which I recommend. It's a really good film to watch. But I can obviously answer questions about the implications of that. I'll come to that in a minute. I'm just going to run through at the moment. So then in the 2000s, after the sidetrack of McDonald's and McLibel and all that global publicity and stuff, I got back to my roots, which was my local community, and started getting involved with setting up a residents association in my neighbourhood, and then discovering there was 100 residents associations around the borough. And then we formed a federation of residents associations, which I became the secretary of. So that was very active as a federation for a long time. Kind of fizzled out a bit, but there's still a lot of groups. But then in my local park, which is Lordship Recreation in the centre of Tottenham by Broadwater Farm, which is the largest green space in Tottenham, we formed a Friends of group because the park was in a shocking state. Really shocking, people didn't want to go in there, it was unsafe, there was no flower beds, the buildings were derelict. And we started the Friends of Lordship Rec, and we had a mission to transform the park into a great park, which it now is. And of course, when we did that, we discovered there's lots of other Friends groups. In fact, I've noticed coming here on the way from the station, there's a little garden on the upper street, which has got a gardening group that helps to maintain it. Probably they're the only ones that maintain it, I don't know. And then I came through Canonbury Square, and there's a Friends of Canonbury Square. So Friends groups kind of started popping up everywhere around the country. So we started forming networks of Friends groups, and then we set up a national federation called National Federation of Parks and Green Spaces. And amazingly enough, I'm the chair of that national federation, which is all about responsibility and no power whatsoever, because you cannot have any power over Friends groups. They just do whatever they want to do. So it's all about support and encouragement, and also amplifying the voices of the grassroots at a national level. So, we can come into that more a bit later on. So that's my main thing now, actually, parks. I'm still involved with other stuff, but that's my main thing. So just want to say a couple of things now about London Greenpeace, and then about community action generally, and then it's over to you lot, really, what you want to talk about. And so London Greenpeace. So London Greenpeace was formed as a result of this incredible document. Is it on the screen? Can you see that now? See, I bet you all wish you were here that are watching. You get a copy of it. This is the first ever document in the world to be entitled Greenpeace. Okay? And it's 2 months before the Vancouver people, launched their Greenpeace boats. And it was produced as a supplement in Peace News, which is based in Houseman's Bookshop in Caledonian Road. It still is. And it was so popular they reprinted it, and people could buy 100 copies and things, and it was circulated around the country. So, and it really is a clarion call for action by individuals and by groups to take action to transform the world and make it a green world. So it's a powerful document. And actually, I have to say, I hadn't read it in detail until last night. I thought, I better read this document. And it's incredible how visionary it is, actually. So I do recommend you all get a copy of that. Attached to that is a history of London Greenpeace. So you can get a bit of an idea about what London Greenpeace has done over the last 30, 40 years. When we were sued by McDonald's, a lot of energy had to go into defending that case. So the group kind of fizzled out afterwards. It still exists technically. We have an annual meeting or whatever. So just for the record, I also have another amazing document here, which if you were here, you could get a copy of. I'll just put it here. So this is a document signed by Greenpeace UK and London Greenpeace in 1994, because when Greenpeace UK was formed, London Greenpeace was invited to help form, to join in and merge into Greenpeace UK. And we said, no, surely the whole point of the Green Movement is decentralised and it's, autonomous and lots of different ideas and initiatives. So we were the only group in the whole world who didn't join Greenpeace International. We ploughed our own furrow. When the McLibel case, when we were Super McDonald's, it was about to start finally, McDonald's were contacting Greenpeace UK and tried to get them to slag off London Greenpeace. So we met with Sarah Burton from Greenpeace UK and we signed this joint statement recognising each other's, independence and whatever. So that's a historical document. Fun, isn't it? As you get older, you start really getting interested in history. I'm never interested in history before. So the McLibel case, if you've seen the film, you'll kind of get a bit of an idea, although the film concentrates on the kind of, the personalities and the controversies, but really it was a grassroots mass defiance campaign. So although it seemed to be all about the court case, the point was they were trying to stop us giving out leaflets criticising the company. So what we did is we launched a global campaign to give out leaflets criticising the company. In dozens of languages, millions of leaflets were given out all over the world, 3 million in this country alone. And don't forget, this is just about when the internet was just starting. It was unstoppable, basically. So that's the McLibel case. I think if I make one comment that relevant to the theme today is how to link kind of, global issues and people's everyday lives and community action and single issue campaigns, whatever. The powerful thing about the McDonald's campaign was that the issues were addressing people's everyday lives. It's about food, employment conditions, advertising, litter. It mentioned the rainforest, but that's not something that really, engages people in a kind of very personal way. So I think that's why it really struck a chord, and people were just so keen to hand out the leaflets and read the leaflets. And people still come up to me today in the street, believe it or not, and say, I remember getting a leaflet in the 1980s, whatever. Had a powerful effect. So just one thing I want to say before I go on to community action is that amazingly enough, behind the scenes, unknown to us, the police were infiltrating we discovered that in London Greenpeace there were 6 McDonald's infiltrators, not all at the same time, but over a period of 18 months. And we later found out that we had 3 police officers over a 10-year period as well in London Greenpeace. So there's a big public inquiry going on right at the moment about the infiltration of basically left-wing and campaign groups for 50 years by a secret police unit. And to be honest, they've just lost the plot completely. It's quite clear they were totally out of order the whole time, and it's also part of this whole investigation of the Met and corruption and their willingness to abuse their power, having relationships with women as targets in order to get information, and all kinds of disgusting practices. So that's all currently going on right now. There's a big public inquiry. They've already spent about £80 million, and they're taking as long as they possibly can to do as little as they can because the police are obstructing it. But actually a huge amount of stuff is coming out. So I've always sort of not wanted to focus on the police because I think it's sort of a negative thing. You want to concentrate on your positive, what you're trying to achieve, but actually, you know, when they're infiltrating, and that's something that's got to be exposed. So, so coming on to like what I've been doing the last 20 years, mainly community action, residents associations and friends groups and planning issues and community building of all kinds. It's not just a single thing like Friends of Parks group, you know, there's a whole range of things when you're involved with community level activities. And also, you know, there are single issues that come up where, I mean, for example, last weekend, the Extinction Rebellion, who now trying to all over the country build kind of alliances rather than just do things themselves, because obviously we need a massive movement to make fundamental change on climate issues. So they held a kind of discussion event, about 30 people, and there was they made an effort to make sure there was a whole range of groups there, not just environmental activists, but people are active around housing and poverty and so on. So I was happy to be part of that event. But in terms of friends groups, I had given everybody a leaflet. Another reason why you should all be here, another terrific leaflet, which sums up about the Friends of Parks movement. But if I can say something about it, it's the most exciting thing I've ever been involved with. Never having, you know, blockaded an oil tanker in the middle of the Atlantic or anything. Being involved with friends groups is the nearest thing, to be honest, because it's so empowering, potentially. Obviously, it depends on the group, whatever, but there's 7,000 Friends of Parks groups across the UK. And many of them are hands-on involved in helping with maintenance, running notice boards. Sometimes they're involved with managing buildings, like we are in my park in Tottenham. We run the community centre in the middle of the building. It's a passive house building, believe it or not, built 10 years ago. And it's very, very exciting how you can engage with so many people about so many different issues. And it's not based on just speaking to people who, you know, agree with you, if you know what I mean, or you want to agree with you. It's also about working together for a common aim, which is not usually ideological, you know. It's usually about, hey, our park should be as good as it can be. So I think within that, there's lots of discussions about things that we all feel strongly about, recycling and climate. And in fact, in my park, we decided, does anybody know where, Will, you might know, but where the names of the clouds, you know, when you talk about Latin names for clouds, cirrus and nimbus, and all the other things, that comes from a guy who lived in Tottenham 250 years ago, called Luke Howard. He was the guy who named the clouds, and it's still used today, and he lived like a mile away from my park. So we've opened a Luke Howard weather station inside the building that we run in the middle of the park. It's not actually that expensive. It's about 3,000 quid. You can have a decent-ish weather station, but it's mainly for propaganda or awareness raising purposes. And it's not just about the weather, you know, in the abstract. It's about links to climate change, so it can help with discussions about climate and so on. So, you know, there's lots of possibilities. Community groups, although they may have a particular focus, you know, raises all kinds of issues that we feel strongly about, in particular in this room, you know. So yeah, I think I've my approach to everything that I've done, really, I suppose, in my life, is that I want to make taking action about important issues and empowerment, collective empowerment of ordinary people. I want to make that normal. It's normal. It's not about, you know, oh, me and Helen were so amazing in this fantastic court case and nobody else could have possibly have done that. That's completely the wrong message. Yeah, the message is McDonald's are trying to shut us up. Everybody in the world can be part of challenging that, handing out leaflets, talking to the neighbours, whoever it is. So, and it's the same with community groups. It's not about charismatic leaders or even voting for politicians and other people should be doing, X, Y, Z. It's about what we can do ourselves to make a real difference by coming together and taking action. So that's it, really.
Thanks, Dave. I think we'll just throw it open to any questions from anyone. Anything individually about community activism in general? Yeah, Amy.
Thanks, Dave. That was really great. So I'm 47 years old, so I've been alive just a little bit less than you've been an activist. And so much of the stuff that you were involved in or did was like an inspiration to me when I was a young activist. And I met Dave sadly at a mutual friend's memorial, and me and my partner were like, and then I found out as well that you ran the Friends of Lordship Rec and that you've done everything there, which is also amazing because I've lived in Tottenham for 10 years, and yeah, the transformation of the park is absolutely extraordinary. It has just turned a place that was an empty piece of, green space in, at the time, like still very deprived area of North London, and it's turned it into this like vibrant community hub where just the mix of people across Tottenham are using it, and it's one of the spaces that is like, Tottenham can be feel quite segregated at times between the different communities that live there, and everyone's there using that space. So thank you for the work that you've done there. But the question I had was really around, going back to the trial, and just to get a sense from you of like, how did it feel in terms of the pressure that you were under? Because I assume that you were kind of intimidated by McDonald's at various stages, and the length of the trial. How did you keep going through that time?
Okay, so you've got to do what you've got to do. So people do extraordinary things because they have to, and the alternative was to back down, which was never really a realistic alternative, or to just defy, the legal system by refusing to participate, but then we could have been jailed. Or fight. If you're going to fight, you might as well, do your level best. And we were told, that the libel laws are extremely oppressive and unfair, and you want to hide into nothing. Funnily enough, we who could advise us, and Keir Starmer, who was a radical lawyer at that time, very nice bloke, and he said he'd help behind the scenes in terms of the law because we knew nothing about the law. But then, there's a number of things that give you the strength. First of all, if you're part of movements, you've got the support of that movement behind you. Not just on moral support, but financial support, expertise, people, taking on, helping to publicise the case, providing witnesses. So the late people in trade unions who had tried to organise in McDonald's because we were focusing on their housing conditions for 60 days their employment conditions of McDonald's workers for 60 days during the long trial. Frankly, actually, the judge just stopped the trial on the first day and said that, they get minimum wage, so that's the end of that argument. But you say they get low pay. We had to show that minimum wage was low pay. Ridiculous. But so we were forced to do lots of things that should never have been allowed. In fact, the whole case shouldn't have been allowed. But actually, it was all really positive stuff because we were getting support. And we were having a real effect. It was really damaging McDonald's image all over the world. Every day, the longer it went on, the more effect it was having. So, like, you know, that gives you a lot of strength, you know, and truth was on our side. That helps a lot, you know, if you're fighting a libel case. So, so everyone says now, oh, McDonald's shot themselves in the foot, but they'd sued 60 different organisations before they sued us, including, you know, BBC and The Guardian and the Vegetarian Society and theatre groups and student unions and so on, and everybody had always backed down. So it was very important to fight the case. So, being part of a movement, not just a movement, but, you know, with McDonald's and McLibel, we had the backing of trade unions, environmentalists, animal welfare people, campaigners for children's rights, you know, against advertising and so on. So that helped a lot.
Lucy, did you have a question?
Yeah. So to echo a lot of what Emily was saying, you know, it's so, we had Anne Gisella here previously as well, and I'm going to use the word elder, but I don't mean that in disrespect. It's just so inspiring to hear from people who have been in the movement for so long and all of the experiences and tactics that you've deployed over that time and understanding what was successful and the learnings that you took from that. Going back to the poll tax campaign, it feels like you've still got a lot of energy and excitement around the work that you did from what you were saying at the start.
Yes.
I'd love to hear more about what tactics you found particularly successful during that campaign that you feel could still be relevant to today.
Well, I think the most important thing about it was the mass grassroots organising. You know, I mean, people, you know, when they think of the poll tax, they think, oh, Trafalgar Square and the riot and that done for the poll tax, you know, because Margaret Thatcher resigned. So, you know, fairly soon after that. But that was only, you know, the tip of an iceberg, a very big iceberg of people organising in their communities, supporting each other, defying, the legal letters from councils and bailiffs, and about 2,000 people went to jail for non-payment of poll tax. So, so it was quite a significant effort by the state to force people to pay this tax. But 14 million people held out, and it became, they couldn't impose it, so they had to scrap it. So, but the key thing, yes, was definitely the community mobilisation at a very local level. I mean, in Haringey, for example, at one point, we had about, I think, 5 main groups, but at one point we had a group in every ward. So it's about 20 wards, and we leafleted the entire borough, every home, about 4 times during that campaign, which is in a 2-year period. So, yes. That's to me the takeaway from it, and I've given you a copy of the book Poll Tax Rebellion for your library, so I do recommend it. It's so inspiring. And interestingly enough, I remember having a meeting with someone from Scotland, because they bought it in Scotland first, and he came to London, and I was chatting to him. Do you think we can stop it? And he said, yeah. He said, we stopped it in 1381, because the government brought in a poll tax in 1381 and the whole country was in uproar, and there were like riots and whatever, and they had to scrap it. There was almost like a folk memory in this country of poll tax. Of course, the government didn't call it a poll tax, but everyone said, this is a poll tax. And didn't we beat that, hundreds of years ago? So I think, we can certainly be inspired by history.
Anyone else? Yeah, Charlie.
I don't have a very currently forward question, really, sorry. I'm just really excited to be here. I just echo everything that everyone's already said. The case, the McLibel case, is obviously absolutely fascinating, and there's so many interesting dimensions about it. And I think everyone's already mentioned how inspirational it was. But also, I think the impact of that case in so many ways we still see now. You mentioned before about how McDonald's had filed 60-odd lawsuits before. Yes. There'd been this long pattern of legal intimidation that preceded that case. One of the things we saw afterwards is that big corporations using these slaps in the UK is rarer now in the UK.
Yes.
And, so much of, whether or not these lawsuits do emerge as a problem is often due to cultural factors.
Yes.
And I think in that way, you manage to really delegitimise slaps as a tactic that had a huge impact and still has today.
Yes.
But I guess, sorry, that wasn't a question, it was just more of a point. I think it's important to acknowledge it. But the reason I say it is because in the UK, we still have a real problem with these lawsuits. They just emanate from powerful, wealthy individuals.
Yes.
Outside of the UK, we still see big corporations using them.
Yes.
In the US in particular, which is something that Greenpeace has been targeted by. So I guess the question is, especially now in the digital age, in a highly polarized age, and in an age where corporations have so much money and they're able, and they preempt this by pouring money into PR campaigns against a target, how would you replicate that elsewhere?
Replicate what?
The effect of the successful campaign to counter their mind.
I mean, as I said earlier, like, if you're going to be sued by, a multinational corporation with a massive high public profile.
Yeah.
Because that guarantees you it's all bad news for them, because they don't want people to be, the media and others to be investigating what they're up to. So, whereas if you're sued by someone that no one's ever heard of, it's hard to get any kind of publicity and profile. So I think what we did is we kind of milked it as much as we could. The media often don't cover our campaigning unless there's some, major incident or an ongoing court case. So if there are court cases, the thing is to turn the tables and use the court case as a platform to criticise that company or individual, or, raise the issues, not just get bogged down with the legalities of the court case. Yeah, so while we were kind of in the court, with all that kind of tedious legal stuff, I mean, there was 40 days of legal argument in a 313-day trial. But outside, we're spreading the word, and because of the court case, it gave us a profile. After our case, lawyers were advising their clients not to do a McLibel in this country. But yes, but like you say, slap suit still continues.
Louise.
How have you funded your activism, so both locally and when it's been court case?
Yeah, so it's all voluntary, basically. Every group or campaign has to decide, if it needs money and how to raise. I mean, say for a friends group, in one way, they don't need any money at all. You're there, you're in your green space, you're talking to people, you're organising activities. But if you want to make improvements to that space, you may need to fundraise. So there's grants, there's crowdfunding. If you want a children's playground, that's like £100,000 before you've even, taken a breath. So I just think it depends on what campaign, what group, what issue. But virtually everything I've ever done, nobody ever gets paid, which means that you don't need so much money to do it. I mean, obviously, if you're managing a big organisation like Greenpeace, you have to have staff and they need to be paid. I'm sure you'll all agree on that. But say, for example, in Lordship Rec, my local park, where we run the building in the middle of the park, we have got 50 volunteers, but we've got 5 paid staff to help coordinate that building. So then you have to generate income from hire of rooms and cafe sales. So, I think every situation is different, really. I mean, with the McLibel case, we had public appeals. We got about £30,000. McDonald's spent £10 million. All completely wasted as far as they're concerned, because it was all bad news for them. But yeah, but we did need funding, so yeah.
The chat.
Shall I read it out? Yeah. Shirley's got a question. She said, it's really inspiring to hear your story and your focus to make activism something that everyone could and should be involved in, and that being the norm. I'd be interested to know what your current passion and focus is.
Yes, well, basically it's parks. So the thing about parks is your local park, and then there's 60 friends groups in Haringey. So we have a Haringey Friends of Parks Forum, and in fact we're meeting on Saturday. I'll be preparing for that. Then there's a London Friends of Green Spaces network with 900 groups across London. Guess who's the chair of that? And then there's the National Federation trying to, mobilise and speak up for and support, 7,000 groups across the country. So, that all takes a lot of effort. And to me, parks, some people love parks because they love nature. My focus is people. What I love about parks is how people can, use them and interact and organise activities. And also it's seen as a kind of neutral space where you can organise and you can, lobby for resources or whatever. And it's not seen as political, so it's not party political, and it's not, I think a lot of things get kind of, oh, that's political, I don't want to get involved with that. But it is political, but it's not seen as political. So there's a lot of potential there for very exciting. It may not sound exciting when you speak about it, but if you're involved with it, like in my park, somebody came to our group, they wanted to do a park run, which is a weekly running event. It takes organising, takes funding. We gave them support, and now it's happening every Saturday morning. And they want to do a children's park run on the Sundays as well. And that's forever. Park run is forever. And there's 700 of these park runs around the country. So, that's something you can enable to happen. That's really empowering. You look back, and we got our annual general meeting on Sunday of our local friends group. And, I've got to read all the minutes and do a kind of chair's summary of the year. And I know I'll look back and think, blimey, we've achieved a lot this year. We've held park run, we've done the weather, we've got the new weather station in the hub, and we managed the orchard fields. We managed to get the council to do a contract for the river maintenance. There's loads and loads of stuff you can achieve. So I think people, very often if you've got, you want to change the world, it's quite demoralising, isn't it? Because things are shit, or everywhere in the world at the moment, so you want to have things that you can point to and say, that's really positive. It was achieved by collective action. It's made a difference. The public love it. Hopefully that gives a bit of optimism and hope that if we had enough people involved with enough, groups and movements, then people start saying, well, there's millions of us, billions of us. Why are we putting up with the world being run by a tiny elite of greedy, ruthless psychopaths when we should be running the world? In our billions, we should be doing it. But we have to do that, street by street, neighbourhood by neighbourhood, park by park, school by school. We have to kind of give people a sense of empowerment and optimism.
I've got a question following on from that, which is something, well, you said over lunch, which I think is a great mindset for everyone to kind of think about with organising, is just assume that all the skills and experience you need to do the thing you want to do exist in the community that you're working with. I think that's really, and I suppose the tension for us is the timescales of some of the things that we're trying to change are so much shorter, and unlocking that skills and experience is, you've just described the most amazing life's work. Yes. And we get worried that we might not have that amount of time.
Of course.
So I guess any advice or any thoughts you have on how to balance that tension? Because we don't want to impose.
The thing is,
the solutions to be imposed either.
Yeah, the situation is so extreme and so urgent, but ultimately can only be addressed if billions of people around the world, sense that they've got to do something. The situation is so extreme, you know, so with the sort of the Friday school kids strike, you know, that was so exciting that this movement is going to spread and double every year, you know, and then it kind of, you know, fades a bit into the background. It hasn't reached the point yet where millions of people are demanding action about the climate and biodiversity crisis and all that kind of stuff. So, but movements can develop very fast, you know, and we've just got to hope if we keep beavering away and saying what we're saying. But I think it's very important that this is, I suppose, something for Greenpeace to consider, but same with the McLibel case. It's not about charismatic individuals doing incredible things. That is not the way to change the world. The way to change the world is that ordinary people feel empowered, that they can come together, they can speak out, they can take action, they can make a real difference. So although I'm involved with parks, it's partly because there's an opportunity there to show how people can be empowered. But I would like people to say, well, we've seen what's happened in parks, or the poll tax, or even Greenpeace out, you know, challenging oil takers, you know, that's inspired us to demand immediate change in the crisis that we're in. So, to me, there's always is it ulterior motive? I'm not quite sure, but a kind of a bigger agenda, if you like. So, although I'm obsessed with parks at the moment, there's a bigger agenda, which is community empowerment. That is the real message, that people can come together and make a difference. And then hopefully, as the crisis gets worse, because it's not going to get any better, millions and hopefully hundreds of millions and billions of people will start saying, we've got to do something. And I remember when I went to Poland a few times in the 1980s, and they were saying they had no civil society. You know, under communist, you know, governments, you know, there was no civil, apart from the church, which of course is pretty useless. There was no civil, they had to build civil society in order to, you know, go to the next stage of being able to express themselves and organise, you know. And I think that we're very lucky in this country. We've had, you know, hundreds of years of unbroken civil society, self-organisation. It's not actually that difficult. There's a million different voluntary groups in this country, organised by ordinary people, whether it's a beekeeping society or, history class or whatever it is. People know how to organise. And to me, that's in some ways what's the most frustrating thing. It's not because changing the world is difficult. Actually, it's quite easy. Yeah, everybody can do it in the world. They just have to kind of, you know, organise and not take no for an answer. So, I mean, obviously that's difficult if you're in China or a place that's going to put you in jail. But...
Any other questions from anyone or anyone who's online? Yeah, Danny.
Thank you. This is so inspiring. I'm going to go back into the courtroom to see how we actually then get the courtroom out to the world, because
yes.
A lot of our strategies are now developing into strategic litigation and how we take to how we legally take to court companies that are destroying nature or polluting climate or whatever it is, yes. Or governments as well. And one of the challenges is just how we're going to get
beyond the courtroom kind of thing, so that people know what the issues are.
Exactly, and bring the people with us and
yes.
make everyone part of a court case.
Yes.
That happened, of course, in your case.
Yes.
And everyone came into a courtroom, if you want.
Yes.
It's
interesting, you know, because just as it made me think that the Daily Mail was going around visiting all the people I grew up with and my mum and dad and stuff. You know, they were obviously going to do an attack on us, you know, and they never did. And it just struck me that we weren't the issue. McDonald's was the issue. Yeah, so if the Daily Mail had printed an attack on us, everybody reading it said, you know, that's a bit out of order. You know, these couple of people here standing up to this giant corporation. So we have to, use, the power that comes from being involved with a court case somehow to get the message out, not get too bogged down in, you have to get bogged down in the detail, but think beyond that as well, yes.
Were there any more on screen? I had another one just in Zoom. You might remember Jackie Weaver and the Rules of Procedure Zoom court case. And I guess I'm just amazed at patience of people working in community groups, particularly setting them up. And I suppose the kind of stamina to do that level, because when people are voluntary, people are doing their absolute best, but they might have no experience of how to organise. And I suppose any kind of reflections on how to upskill and how to kind of work with people so that community groups can get what they want to do done.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has their life and their character and their experiences to contribute, and when you're choosing a member of staff at Greenpeace, you want the person who's perfect, who's got the skills and, the experience, but in a community group, it's whoever walks in the door, but also there's other people out there who are not walking in the door. You think, well, we need someone who's, whatever, good at setting up a website and we haven't got someone doing it, or we need someone who's, got great experience working with kids. And I think that somehow you have to attract, like you say, in the community, there's all those skills and passion. It's how you attract that, because people aren't encouraged to look sideways. They're encouraged to look upwards at celebrities and politicians and leaders. So they're not used to kind of necessarily networking and what skills have I got that I could contribute to whatever it is, this group or this project. So, and sometimes it's frustrating. You think, if it was just a pretty well-organised group of 5 people who really knew what they were doing, we could achieve so much more, rather than 20 people with half the people aren't that interested and there's, couple of obnoxious people and whatever, like me, whatever, but it's a different mindset, that everybody that comes in, it's like that they represent hundreds of people. So someone who's struggling to engage but is interested, there's hundreds of people in the community that are struggling to engage and are interested. So somehow you've got to find a way of getting more people involved and a wider range of people and more skills, whatever the group is. And there's so many different kinds of groups. But also, you've got an absolute right to be there. So for example, I'm an anarchist, so my politics are get rid of the government and corporations and run the world ourselves. Now, that's not mainstream in our society, but I've got a right to my views like everybody else. So the thing about a community group, it's a great leveller. It's not about we all have to think the same thing. So you can get frustrated that people don't agree with you, but at the same time, they can't get rid of you either, because you've got a right to be there as well. It's my local park. I've got a right to be here, and I've got a right to, fight for improvements or whatever. So I think that it's a different kind of politics, if you like, working with a whole range of people who don't necessarily agree with about things that you think are really important necessarily. And same for them. It's a challenge for them as well. They've got to sit in a room with someone who's always banging on about the climate. Why are they banging on about the climate instead of housing or, whatever it is, litter,
Yeah, Eleanor.
Thank you so much. A couple of things strike me as one, theme of perseverance and stamina across your experiences. And secondly, I guess maybe particularly around your community work, bringing together disparate individuals and making that into like a group or a team of people. And you talked about the importance of having like a shared vision. or like certainly for you, a bigger umbrella theme of like community empowerment. But it strikes me that setting milestones might have been quite important for you. And I just wondered if you had any reflections on either perseverance or on how you create more of a sort of feeling of communality or shared goals when you're bringing together people into one.
So on the perseverance things, a lot of people are concerned about, we've got to avoid burnout and, we've got to keep, obviously, if you want to change the world and make the world a better place, it's lifelong. It's not going to happen in a week's time. If you do the right thing, it's going to take years, whatever. But to me, who in this room does washing up? Everybody, see? So they're persevering, lifelong, doing the washing up. Because you have to. So to me, changing the world is something we have to do. So it's lifelong. It's not something that we can let somebody else do, like washing up. You can't let someone, that's everyone's responsibility. Obviously, not everybody thinks changing the world is their responsibility, but it is their responsibility. So that's about like making community action normal so that everybody feels like I should be involved with this, and that's the way I deal with it in terms of, obviously depends on your life and what your issues are, but there aren't any shortcuts and there isn't anyone else that's going to do it for you in terms of making the world a better place. So we all have to do it all the time, as best we can. Whilst, a bit of escapism is good. I watch a lot of football. Just because it's like brainwashing and it's just like washes your mind of any, serious stuff. You can just watch, for 90 minutes, a load of silly people running around kicking the ball. So I think escapism is good. It's useful. Have a break. It helps. I can't remember what the other question was. Knitting people together.
Yeah.
Yes, I think often activists feel like you're knitting people together if you all agree with each other. And you're seeking for people that agree with you. But I think with community level stuff, it's not ideological agreement, it's about, this needs to be done. Or this, I keep going back to Friends of Parks, there's our green space, it's in a shocking state. If we don't do something about it, it's going to get worse and then I can't take my kids there and play on the playground, So I think that the need is a different kind of need from a kind of strategic, ideological need, about things that are wrong in the world. It's things that are close to home. Having said that, it's very frustrating, that when you're doing something in a local community and it's really good, why aren't hundreds and thousands of people getting involved? Why is it still the 8 or 9 of us that were here 5 years ago? So it doesn't happen magically. And there's all kinds of diversions for people, consumerism, praying, doing the lottery. These are things which people think are going to make their life better rather than addressing real structural everyday issues, collectively. So, and also just that people are exhausted or they're really bogged down with their personal lives and, so it's a challenge, like everything. You don't get things like the anti-poll tax movement very often. Think like, wow, look how amazing our society is that millions can be defying the government. But then why won't they define the government with, when they scrap the housing, you know, the rental fair rent system, which kept rents at an affordable level by law, and security of tenure. How shocking is that? They were able to scrap that in 1988 or whenever it was. You know, there should have been mass uproar about that, you know, but so it's hard to know what things create mass uproar and mass movements. You know, who'd have known that when, you know, Greta Thunberg, you know, sat outside her school, that would spread around the world. It may not have done. You know? We all live in hope, don't we? We all live in hope that there's going to be new movements that give us all, you know, encouragement.
One more
One last
question.
From Cash. You worked closely with Keir Starmer and he was keen to mention his involvement in the McLibel case when he ran for leader of the Labour Party. Do you trust him?
Well, obviously, he went downhill when he went into politics. I don't know. It's not for me to comment. You know, it's he's a nice guy. He wants to be Prime Minister. To get to be Prime Minister, you've got to do what you've got to do. But it's not a nice. You know, it's you know, you have to climb on the backs of other people and get to the top and say what the public want to hear or the media want to hear. The media basically control the elections, who gets elected. So you've got to, you know, I mean, you know, obviously Jeremy Corbyn had more sensible politics, but the media would, you know, attacked him viciously and, you know, so I mean, yeah. What can I say? Yeah.
Can't get much better.
Cool. Well, thanks very much. If you want to give a round of applause. Clearing the chairs away afterwards, that'd be great. Next month.